So let's talk about the Houston Dynamo, who were one of the many teams that got eliminated last week from playoff contention. And if you think some of the things that I wrote here is very similar to what I wrote last year when I did the Moving Forward series episode for the Houston Dynamo, that's because it is. If you compare this year to last year of the Dynamo, you could say that it's basically the exact same thing. And that I think the only difference between last season to this season with the Dynamo is that last season they won US Open Cup. This season they did not. Other than that, all the issues that they had and all the reason, well, at least most of the reason why they got eliminated again for the playoffs like last year is basically the same issue as last season. But the Dynamo currently heading into decision day with an 11-4 and 18 record, and they currently have 37 points. They've scored 42 goals this season, but allowed 57 goals so far this season, and they allow 3 more goals, they would give up 60 plus goal this season. And anytime when you give up 60 plus goal in a season or close to giving up 60 plus goal a season, you know your defense have a huge issue. And the goal differential is minus 15. In terms of the top goals scored for the Dynamo, unsurprisingly for the second year in a row, Mauro Manotas leads that list with 13 goals. Albert Velez with 8 goals, followed by Memo Rodriguez with 6 goals. Thomas Martinez with 5 goals, and Christian Ramirez, who just came into the club via that trade that happened right at the end of the secondary transfer window, currently have 3 goals. Top assist leader, unsurprisingly, Elise currently tops that list with 8 assists. Manotas followed that with 6 assists, Memo Rodriguez with 5, Adam Lundqvist with 4, and Tommy McNamara rounds out that list with 3 assists. So what went right for the Dynamo? Well, the Manotas and Elise connection is still strong in that, they basically kind of carry the team in some ways in terms of the goal scoring and the creativity. I mean, there's been times where when the Dynamo did not have Elise in a game where they just look like the worst team in the league. And that when Elise does play with the Dynamo, they look at least in somewhat a competitive team and a team that looked like could make the playoffs. That's how important Elise has been. And also, let's not forget Manotas, that's been really their main goal scorer, and that for the second year in a row, he's able to score a double-digit goal. Now, the other thing that went right is that the fans at least got part of what they wished for by firing Wilmer Cabrera in the middle of the season. So, from what I heard, a lot of Dynamo fans were not only unhappy with the owners, but they were also unhappy with Wilmer Cabrera, and that there was a lot of Cabrera out with a lot of Dynamo fans. Well, the good news is they got their wish, as Wilmer Cabrera was fired in the middle of the season, and now it's going to be interesting to see who exactly is their next head coach. And they got off to a great start to the season. I mean, people forget that this team was actually near the top part of the Western Conference in the beginning of the season, and that we thought that maybe this is going to be something special and that maybe the Dynamo could be a very surprising team. Turns out that, of course, wasn't the case, and it also turns out the reason why they were so good in the beginning of the season is because they had a ton of home games and they were playing some of the most easiest team that any team has been facing early part of the season. And then when they face against those tough team and when they face against playoff kind of level opponent, that's when they basically got fined out. What went wrong for the Dynamo, besides the fact that they got fined out when they started playing some tough opponent, is that row form is still a problem. And I capitalize still a problem, and I probably should have also underlined it, because I think this is now the 3rd season in a row that I have to say that the Dynamo on the road has just been probably the worst team on the road. Like, if you look at the last 3 seasons, I won't be surprised if they are dead last in the category of wins and points on the road, because for whatever reason, whenever this team goes away from BBVA Compass Stadium, they just look like the worst team in the league and just cannot able to get a victory no matter what they will do on the road. The defense and attack was very bad, and as I mentioned, the defense 57 goals conceded this season. And, I did say in the beginning of the year that I was kind of concerned about this defense that looked very kind of suspect. And boy, this season, it kind of proved my point. The fact that this defense was absolutely hot garbage for a majority of the season. And I also wrote attack was bad. Besides Elise and Manotas kind of contributing, there's really nobody else on this team that can have that same quality as Elise and Manotas has. And that is also the reason why they only have scored 42 goals this season, and that most of those goals came from Manotas and Elise. Now, the other thing that went wrong for them this season is that the team collapsed after the All-Star break, and I also should have probably wrote the team collapsed after this All-Star break for the second year in a row, because just like last year, where right after the All-Star break, that's when they started to kind of collapse and started to just go into a capitulation. It's happened again this year, where right as the All-Star break was over, that's when they really, they were kind of already start collapsing and showing signs that this team is definitely not a playoff kind of team back in June once they start playing the tough opponent. But it really shone after the All-Star break, even when they're playing at home against teams that you probably think that they should beat, they weren't able to beat those teams, and that the home form was basically started to be kind of almost the same as their road form, which was very, very bad. And keep in mind, this is a team that has just been so reliant on their home form. Even going back to when they make the playoffs 2 years ago and surprisingly got all the way into the Western Conference Final. One of the reasons why they made the playoffs in that year was because they were very good at home, and that because they were very good at home, that is the reason why it carried you to the playoffs. Because remember, in MLS, you don't necessarily have to be that good on the road to make the playoffs. As long as if you win all your home games and able to get some points on the road, you are going to be making the playoffs. And that's exactly the formula the Dynamo followed 2 years ago. And remember last year when they won the U.S. Open Cup, and how in the world did they win the U.S. Open Cup last year? Well, that's because all of their whole game, U.S. Open Cup game, was at BBVA Compass Stadium, and it's no wonder why they won it. If they would have gone on the road at least once in that U.S. Open Cup, I think they probably would have lost. Although I will not say that the Dynamo don't deserve in terms of winning that U.S. Open Cup last year, because yes, they have a lot of home games, or they had pretty much every single home game of the U.S. Open Cup at home, but at the same time, you can probably see why exactly maybe they got win the U.S. Open Cup, considering last year they were also very good at home. Now, moving forward for this team, obviously the biggest thing that the Dynamo is going to look into is their next head coach, as they're still having their interim head coach basically managing for the last couple of months after Wilmer Cabrera was fired. And, as the ownership and the GM had said, the new head coach that they are looking into has to fit into the culture of the Dynamo. And if I'm a Dynamo fan, that is definitely not something you want to hear, because throughout many seasons, a lot of people have complained, a lot of Dynamo fans have complained about this team, mainly because it is literally the cheapest team in MLS. They literally have the cheapest owner. They spend probably the least amount of money on player, and it just feels like they just kind of stuck in that MLS 1.0 mindset that, we're going to try to go cheap and trying to balance the shoestring budget that we have, but we're going to still somehow find some diamond in the rough despite the fact that we have that shoestring kind of budget. Yeah, it just does not work anymore in MLS 3.0 era, where you literally have to spend some money to try to get some quality player, because if you are just penny pinching in terms of getting these players, yeah, you are not going to go anywhere, and that you're not going to be a team that's going to be competitive in MLS. If you look at all the teams that is competitive in MLS, one of the reasons why they're so competitive is because they spent money on getting some quality player, and because of that, they are now at the top echelons of MLS. The second thing that the Dynamo moving forward need to do is rebuild. There's no doubt that they're gonna blow out this off season. Like I just don't see how the Dynamo is gonna try to keep most of this team heading into next season, because with them getting a new head coach, and also most likely, as I move on to the third thing that they're going to do this offseason, is that they're going to try to sell Menottes and Elise, and that hopefully with the amount that they get from Menottes and Elise, which I think it should be a big amount because they have been the only players that have contributed to this team in terms of attacking, and in that hopefully with that amount of money that can kick off this rebuild and try to get some quality player into this rebuild, and that they can of course get themselves back competitively again. Now the problem with that is that what I'm worried about this rebuild is that this team has a ownership that is unwillingly to try to spend money, and that's what I'm kind of worried about. The fact that yes, if they sell Menottes and Elise, they will get some big kind of chunk of money out of those players. The question is, will the ownership decide to spend it? Because if the ownership does not try to spend that kind of money on this rebuild and trying to get some better player, then it just makes no sense of selling Menottes and Elise. Like, you might as well just keep them and maybe start a rebuild in that way and trying to build around both of these guys. But we shall see what exactly is going to be the case, and that I'm pretty sure that Menottes and Elise would be sold after this off season. I mean, I'm pretty sure Elise most likely will be the first one to go, because he's been drawing a lot of interest in Europe, and that throughout this season there was a lot of report the fact that he was going to go to Europe, and that of course at the final hour that didn't happen, and then we had the same rumor in the secondary transfer window. Obviously that didn't happen again, and now with the way that this team is on a rebuild, and that I just think that they need to really kind of sell off the pieces that they still have to try to get some money off the ground, and trying to invest that on this rebuild. The best way to do it is try to sell Elise and Menottes and see what happens as you use that money to try to rebuild this team. But either way, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this moving forward series? And if you're a Dynamo fan, what do you think? What went right? What went wrong? And most importantly, moving forward, what do you think this team is going to do in the offseason to try to get this team more competitively? But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.